Hey everybody, welcome back to the Amtryke channel. I'm Jake, and today we're going to be building our new Paceline 20. This model has got rear steering, and we're going to go all the way from unboxing, show you everything that comes in the box, along with a full build out to the time that it can be ridden off. First, we're going to start here. We're going to go ahead and remove our banding. So every trike that we send out comes with a green banding. You're going to need some strong scissors to remove these. Let's just get those scissors underneath. And you get a nice little pop sound. Remove one side, remove the other. I'm going to go ahead and get those out of our way so that we don't trip over them. Now we can go ahead and open our box. So it's stapled on the top along with those straps. And we're going to go ahead and set all of our components out on our table. So as you can see here, we've just unboxed our Paceline 20 with a rear steering kit. Now we're going to go through and identify each component that comes in the kit along with it. Yours may vary slightly depending on what different accessories and components that you've ordered. But we're going to start here to my right, your left. This is our main frame assembly. As you can see, because it has our rear steering kit, it already has our handle pre-attached, cable already run for it. And then we're going to come around to the table here. We're going to go front to back. We have our basket that was in our small parts box. We have our front frame assembly along with the front brake and brake lever assembly. We have our seat base with the plastic cartridge to keep it from marring the frame. We have both locking bolts. We have our seat post bolt. We have our front steering rod, and back here we have our rear steering rod. We have our Amtryke safety flag. We have our parking brake post, our parking brake mechanism, our telescoping handlebars, our seat post, our seat back, our push handle, our large pommel seat, and our small parts bag that includes our steering limiting pin, our front wheel quick release, our adjustable wrench, our 3-way Allen wrench, our multi-tool, our front reflector, our rear reflector screw, and our drive wheel key. And then down here on the bottom, we've got our front wheel and both of our rear wheels. Okay, so we're going to start with our first assembly step now. That's going to be to install our rear drive wheel. So I'm standing here behind the trike. That's how you're going to orient yourself. So this is my right side, which is going to be our drive side. So the axle's pre-installed from the factory. We're going to need to knock off these plastic caps and remove the white shipping spacers here. So in order to do the installation, I'm going to need an adjustable wrench, my locking key, and my drive wheel. The way to know that you have the drive wheel is there's going to be a yellow sticker on the inside that says drive wheel inside. Make sure this sticker points inside and is on the right side of the trike. So we're going to start first by disassembling this. So we're going to use our adjustable wrench just to tap our plastic caps off, just like that. And then we're going to start to remove this. And you'll notice that it's wanting to spin just a little bit. So the whole axle is spinning right now. I'm going to come over here, grab this crank arm, and hold the drive system still while I remove this nut. And once I get it loose enough, I don't have to hold that any longer. And as soon as the nylon is disengaged, I can spin it off by hand. So I'm going to remove my nut. There's a small washer behind it and my shipping spacer. The shipping spacer won't be reused. So now I've got the nut, the washer, and the key. This key should be in your small parts kit. And what you're going to do is you're going to rotate this axle until you locate the slot for your drive key. So right now it's not Get somewhere where I can see it. So I'm going to spin this over until I can see the key slot here. You'll notice that there's plenty of room to fit this key in. So I'm going to come in, drop my key into the slot, and push it all the way up against the bearing. Now I'm going to grab my drive wheel. There's also a key slot in the drive wheel. Again, I'm making sure that the yellow sticker is facing on the inside. Make sure this key and this keyhole are lined up. Go ahead and slide my wheel on until it touches that inner bearing. Next, I'm going to install my washer and then my nut, making sure that the blue ring, the nylon, is facing toward the outside. I'm going to start that by hand. And I'm just going to snug this for now. So again, I'm not going to fully tighten, just enough so that it's not moving around a whole lot. So I'm going to stop there. Now I'm going to come over to my non-drive wheel, which I don't have to worry about a key because it's not driven. But again, I'm going to go ahead and pop off the plastic cap. And then I'm going to remove this axle nut. And you can see that my axle is spinning again. Now that we've installed the drive wheel, we can use the drive wheel to hold the axle in place while we temporarily remove our axle nut and washer. So there's the nut, there's the washer, and our shipping spacer. Then I'm going to grab my non-drive wheel. And just like we did on the drive side, I want to make sure that this flange is facing inside. So then I'm going to go ahead and slide this on until it bottoms out against the frame bearing. Then I'm going to install my washer and my axle nut. Again, starting them by hand. Grab our adjustable wrench and we're going to start tightening. And we're only going to tighten until we just hit the wheel and we've eliminated lateral play. I'm not sure if it's showing up on camera, but I've still got a little bit of lateral play. The wheel's moving a little bit like this, and we want to eliminate that. So we're going to just give it about 1/8 of a turn, and you can see here that our axle will spin. So again, we're going to hold our drive wheel and give it about 1/8 of a turn. There, we've eliminated our lateral play and our wheel spins relatively freely, which is what we want, which means that our non-drive side is set. Now we're going to come back to our drive side and we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to tighten this lock nut until we've eliminated lateral play. What you're seeing there is the frame moving. It seems that we've got this tightened up the way we want it. It's not overly tight. Tightening it more is actually going to make it more difficult to pedal. So make sure you just get it tight enough to eliminate that lateral play. And what you're looking for is about 1 to 2 threads sticking out just past this axle nut. So here we've got about 1 thread sticking out on the drive side, and on the non-drive side we've got about 1 to maybe 1 1/4, 1 1/2 threads sticking out on this side. So that tells me that the axle is centered on the trike. Both wheels don't have any lateral play. So now we can come in with our caps and we're going to press those back on. And now our rear wheels are installed. We're going to go ahead and get started on our next step. So in our first step, we installed both of our rear wheels, and we did this with the trike sitting on top of the box. I wanted to talk through that. So we didn't want to build this on a table because not everybody's going to have access to a table to put this together. So you can actually use the box that the trike came in to go ahead and get these wheels installed. It's important that you don't put this together on the ground just yet, because what you don't want is for your chain tensioner to hit the ground. So if your wheels aren't installed, then this chain tensioner here would actually contact the ground, and it could cause your chain tension potentially to come loose. And if you have our 3-speed model, it could actually cause damage to the derailleur. So this ensures that our drive system stays safe. But moving forward on our next steps, we're going to go ahead and move this down to the ground, and that should give us a better view of all the upcoming steps. Okay, so our next step is going to be to start on our rear steering handle. But before we do that, we want to go ahead and flip up our kickstand. This kickstand is intended for assembly and disassembly. It's not intended for a rider to be on. So we're just going to go ahead and utilize it for what it's for. Our kickstand's down here on the bottom underneath our crank system. We're just going to fold that down and let it sit in place. Okay, so our next step, we've moved here to the back of the trike. We're going to go ahead and install our rear steering handle. So the handle comes pre-installed, or the cable for the handle comes pre-installed, I should say. And you're going to want to make sure that that cable is still tight in the caliper here at the bottom and at the lever here at the top. So then we're going to be installing it in the housing here in the rear. So there's a quick release lever that's going to hold it in place. So I'm just going to open this lever by pushing out on the lever, and it will release the tension. While keeping that in place, I'm going to go ahead and slide this handle down in. And I want to make sure that that fully seats. So I'm just going to rotate the bottom a little bit while I push down from the top. And it seemed it's fully bottomed out. I'm looking for about 3 inches of depth there, just to make sure that once we do clamp it, we've got good engagement between the bar and our connector lever here. So once we have this in and it's fully bottomed out, we're going to go ahead and position our quick release. So we want to make sure that it's pointing in the correct direction so that this lever and this nut don't contact the basket once it's installed. So I'm going to make sure that it's around the 10 o'clock position. So if I'm standing behind the trike, and if this lever was a clock, 12 o'clock would be facing straight forward, 6 o'clock would be facing back, 9 o'clock would be to the side. I want this to be about the 10 o'clock position. I also want to check 2 things. I want to make sure that this lever here is pointing directly at our non-drive wheel. So we've got it properly positioned, pointing in this direction. And then I'm also going to make sure that my handle is in line with my frame in this direction. So I'm going to rotate this just a little bit. And I think that's good. And I've still got this pointing at my wheel. I'm going to put my quick release in the 10 o'clock position, and I'm going to close it. And I can tell you from experience, that was pretty easy to close, which tells me that it's not going to clamp this bar well. So if it's too hard to close, there's a nut here on the backside, and you can loosen the nut, and it'll make it much easier to close that quick release. It's actually too easy for me to close it, so I'm going to add a few turns and then close that. Still a little bit easy for me. You're looking for about 25 to 30 pounds of pressure here to ensure that this bar isn't going to spin. And that feels much better. And you can also see that I've got this angled down just a little bit. This quick release starts up here and then points down just a little bit to ensure that we've got room to clear the basket once it's installed. So now we're going to check our installation, and it appears everything rotates correctly and this is locked into place. Okay, so next step is we're going to go ahead and attach our front frame to our rear frame. So they ship separate, but they have been pre-installed and tested at the factory. So we have our front frame here, we have our fork here. There's a knob on the front fork. If you're standing behind the trike, you want to make sure that that knob is on the left side. So you're also going to make sure that the fork swoops out. That is going to ensure that this is on the left side. So once we have that set, we're going to go ahead and start on our connection assembly. Ours actually made it in position, which this would be the correct position, but during shipping it's possible for this to come out. So in order to make sure that it's back in the correct position, you're going to point this bolt straight up to the sky, and you have a button here that has a round hole, and then you have an eyelet with a spring on it underneath. So you're going to push your button into that spring to make sure that it rides on that eyelet. And then we're going to rotate toward the back. There's a small cavity here. And while I push down on that button, it's going to allow me to slide it into that cavity. And that means we are ready to go ahead and start setting our connection. So once that's done, we're going to come to our front here. We have a male flange on the front frame, female flange here. So that gives us positive engagement. So I'm going to come from the top and I'm going to lower the front frame into the rear frame. And there's a positive engagement. There's a small hole in the bottom there, and there's a small key in the bottom here. So if we have those lined up properly, when I drop that down, you can hear them almost click into place. And here we have our, where the two flanges come together is a great indicator. So I've just pulled that out and I have a gap here. But what I can do is make sure that that gap is closed on both sides, and that ensures that my frame is properly aligned front to rear. So now we're going to move up to the top. As you can see, the button and the bolt actually lifted a little bit during that process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push forward from the front here, and you can see that gap closing in between the two flanges. And at the top of the bolt here, I'm just going to pull down with my finger until it fully seats in this recessed cavity on the rear frame. So at this point, we are ready to go ahead and close the system. So there's a tab here on the button we were talking about earlier, and there's a lever, and this lever is just going to clear this tab barely. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the lever over, again making sure that our flanges are still properly aligned. And you can see it sort of stops in this position here. When you get here, you're going to go ahead and pull back on your tab. And while I've got this pulled back, I'm going to push down on the lever until it hits the bottom. And then I'm going to release this tab. And that's going to seat our safety button against this ledge here. So I'm going to show you an incorrect assembly. You can see that there's a gap in between the end of this button and this lever here. And then you'll see when I push down on this lever, it's going to close that gap. I don't have that gap there anymore, and what that's going to do is ensure that this lever can't be opened during riding. So now I can go ahead and flip our tab back down, and our front and rear frames are connected. So before we move on to the next step, we're going to cover some safety measures with this connection between our front and rear frame. So everything went together smoothly for us, but just in case that doesn't happen for you, the first thing we want to do is make sure that the assembly has gone together properly. So now that everything's locked in, have it assembled, I'm going to try to move and twist this front frame and see if I can get any movement in between our lines here. And you can see I can't get any movement, and whatever I do get, the entire frame is moving. So I've got it locked together properly. If you do get movement here, it's very important to reset the tension on the bolt that's under this lever. So I'm going to go ahead and reopen the lever here. So I'm going to push down on the lever, pull back on the button, and then lift up on the lever. That allows me to access this system here. So if you do have movement in the front frame and rear frame, so for example, it's loose right now, and you can see I can move the two pieces independently. So in order to fix that, you're going to use the tools supplied with your trike. This is a 5mm bolt head, Allen bolt head, and you're going to tighten that 1/8 of a turn. So 1/8 of a turn, and then try to reclose this assembly. There should be about 20 to 25 pounds of pressure to close this lever. If it's more than that, it's too much. If it's not that much, then you need to add another 1/8 turn until you get about that required amount of pressure to close the assembly. Okay, so our next step is going to be to install our quick release front wheel. So we have the front wheel here, we've removed the protectors that come installed on either side, and we have our quick release skewer that's going to come in your small parts bag. There are a few pieces with the skewer you want to make sure that are here and are oriented properly. So you have a lock nut here on the outside, you have one spring and a second spring, and you also have a washer on this side. What's important here is you want to make sure that your washers, they are conical, which means you have a small end and a large end. You want to make sure you have one on each side of the wheel, and the small end should be facing the wheel. The large end should be facing your nut here and your washer here. So this is the configuration that you're looking for. But first, we need to go ahead and install this skewer into our wheel. So we're going to remove the nut, set it to the side, remove a single spring here, and then we have our front wheel. We're going to go ahead and slide it. You have the brake rotor on one side and no rotor on the other. We're going to slide our skewer from the non-rotor side to the rotor side. And we had a small piece of plastic here pop out. Those are from your protectors. Nothing important, so don't worry if those fall out. Those can go in the trash. So now we have our skewer installed on this side, and you can see the conical spring on this side is allowing us to push this through here. So right beside our rotor, we're going to grab the spring that we took off. We're going to take the small end, make sure that it goes in first, and then we're going to take our nut. And we're just going to start threading that nut on, pushing against that spring. And I'm going to install that a few turns. So next, we're going to go ahead and install the wheel into the fork. There are 3 points that you're going to want to look out for. So you have your dropouts here, which is where your wheel is going to slide into. And then you have your brake caliper here. So this rotor is actually going to slide in from the bottom into the calipers here. So I've made sure that my quick release is in the open position, so it's pointing straight out. That ensures that I have the most room to work with. Come from the bottom, make sure that rotor slides into the caliper. Once that's in there, then I'm going to locate this quick release into the fork dropouts. So I'm going to hold this from the bottom, which is going to ensure that the wheel is straight in the fork and contacting both sides of the dropout. And I'm going to try to close this quick release lever. And you can see there's almost no tension required to close this. That means that this is not tight enough. So we're going to leave it in the open position, continue to hold the wheel into the fork, and tighten the nut a few turns. We did 2 or 3 turns there. We're going to try again. Still no tension on our quick release here. So we've got more work to do. We're going to go back to the open position and tighten the nut. Another turn or 2. And then come back to this side and close our quick release. So at this point, I have a little bit of tension on the quick release, enough to hold it in the fork, which is great. That's what we want. That ensures that it will stay in place, and our next step is going to be to flip up our kickstand. We're not going to fully install this until the weight of the trike is resting on the wheel, which is going to ensure that it's properly aligned. So we're going to lift up on our fork here, flip the kickstand up, and now we have our front wheel on the ground. We're going to open our quick release lever again, so it's pointing straight at me. And then we're going to add a half a turn. And it's important that you have this quick release oriented in a way that's not near something that can get snagged or caught. I like to point it toward the back of the trike, so it's less likely to get caught on anything, to ensure that the wheel stays in place. Still not requiring much effort here to get this closed. So again, I've got it in fully open position. Add another half to quarter turn on the nut, and then I'm going to go ahead and close my quick release. Now I've got some good tension. So when I close it, it snaps into place and the wheel isn't moving. So now we've got our front wheel fully installed. We can go ahead and move on to our next step. So our next step is to go ahead and install our handlebar into our front frame here. So I've got my handlebar assembly that is somewhat pre-installed in the box, or pre-assembled in the box, and then we have our multi-tool here. The only part we're going to need currently is going to be our 6mm Allen key. So here's my handlebar and stem that are pre-installed. There's a cap in the end of the stem here. I'm simply going to slide that cap out because I'm going to need to adjust here. And you'll notice on the stem there is a dashed line here. That is your minimum insertion line. You need to make sure that that is not visible once you install the stem. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and loosen our nuts here, bolts, sorry. And they're not going to take much. I'm just doing about a quarter turn at a time. And that's so that we can go ahead and do some adjustment on our handlebar. There we go. Okay, so now you can see I can move the stem independently from the handlebar. So I'm going to rotate the stem down. I want my levers facing up. Depending on the size of your rider, you are going to orient the stem however they need. So it's going to come set up to where the stem is going to point toward the rider. That's going to be great for a rider that need more adjustment out of the handlebar. If your rider has shorter arms, we can rotate this way and we can run our handlebar the other direction. But that's going to be up to you for your rider. So we've got our stems slid in. You can see I have my dotted line here to make sure that that is not visible. And go ahead and just start running this bolt down. I don't want to tighten it yet. Once I have that bolt in place, I'm going to come here in the front and I'm going to hold the front wheel and I'm going to ensure that my stem and front wheel line up. So my front wheel is perfectly in line with my frame. And then from here, I'm also going to line up my stem. So from here, it looks like those are pretty close. Go ahead and tighten the locking bolt for the stem. There we go, so that's locked, and you can see we left these loose. That's because we want to be able to make adjustments for our angle. But first we're going to go ahead and reinstall our rubber cap to cover that first bolt that we tightened. Now we're going to adjust our angle for our rider. I usually try to start at a 45-degree angle and adjust from there based on the rider. So I'm going to eyeball and say that's about 45. And I'm going to tighten one bolt, just snug at this point, and go ahead and tighten the second bolt. If you have any difficulty reaching these two bolts, you can go ahead and loosen these levers. So you have two quick release levers like we used for the rear steer and for our front wheel. So I'm going to loosen those till they're in the open position. And then I'm going to go ahead and slide our handlebar out. And this is how we're going to set that up for our rider. So further in, I'm going to put you closer to the rider, further out, further away from the rider. For video purposes, we're going to start here in the middle. And as you can see, I'm going to close these quick releases. Very easy to close. So just like on the others, I'm going to tighten the nut. And then I'm going to close these until I've got good tension required to close. So there's one. Do the same here. Good tension. Both those are locked. Now I'm going to finish tightening the lock nuts here. And that completes our handlebar and stem installation. Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and install our front brake onto our handlebar. It doesn't come pre-installed because this is going to vary by rider. So depending on your rider, if they are right-hand dominant, then we're going to set up our lever here on the right side, left-hand dominant on the left side. And if you're not sure, if you're giving this away, it's at a school, you can always set it up down here at the bottom so you don't have to cut the foam yet. And then once you know where the rider needs it placed, then we can come in and cut the foam. So we're going to go ahead and set this one up for right-hand dominant. That's what we typically see. So I've got two tools for this. I've got a razor blade to be able to cut the foam, and then I have a 4mm Allen to be able to install and tighten the brake lever. So first thing I'm going to do, set down my Allen wrench, and then go ahead and cut our foam here. For a right-handed rider, I typically try to line up with the telescoping rod here, which is going to put the lever here, and then put the lever at about shoulder width. Okay, so you can see we've notched out our foam here. We made a hole just wide enough for our brake lever to fit in. If it's a little bit too narrow, typically you can slide the foam over just a little bit to give yourself a little bit of room. And then if it's too wide, you can also slide the foam over to close that gap to make it look a little cleaner. So now we're going to go ahead and remove the bolts for the lever using our 4mm Allen on our multi-tool. There's one, and the second, and there's both. And you can see there are some rubber washers that need to sit in between this top piece and the bottom piece of the lever. So now I'm going to go ahead and slide my brake lever into the slot here that I cut on the foam. And then I'm going to take my two-piece clamp and slide it over the top. And then I'm just going to try to start these bolts. So I'm going to start that one, move to this one, push down, and start this one. You want to thread each one in the same amount. So I've got both of these started now. And it is currently snug, which means I can rotate this brake lever however I need. So depending on your rider, you may need to move it down or up, whatever's a comfortable position for them, then come in and fully tighten the 4mm bolts once you've decided on a position. And then we're going to do a little cable management here. You can use zip ties to get this out of the way. I tend to route this so that there's a large curve here. You don't want this to be too short. You can kink the cable there. So what I will do is open my quick release here just slightly, tuck the cable in underneath, and that gets the cable out of our way. If you do need to go a little bit lower, you can also route it under the top ones here. Gives it a little cleaner look, and we don't have too serious of an angle in any one position. You can see here that's a little bit tight under this bar, so I'm just going to move this out so there's nothing to catch there, and then reposition my cable, and there we go. Check and just make sure our brake works properly and it's in a comfortable position. Okay, so next we're going to start on our rear steering linkage rods. So we've got our front rod and our rear rod here. And on our front rod, we have our quick release pin that holds the two together. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that, set it to the side, and I'm going to start with my front rod here. So two things to note: we need to go ahead and remove this knob here on the front, and then we're going to go ahead and slide this through our housing that's just underneath our kickstand. So I'm going to have camera come right here. So there's a small rectangle with a plastic liner that sits here in the bottom. You need to make sure that that linkage rod is run through there. That ensures that it doesn't come out and hit the crank arm here, and the plastic ensures that the paint stays in good shape and everything slides properly. So I'm going to come from the front, and I'm going to put the rear of this rod into our housing here. And because it's new plastic, it can be just a little tight to get it started. There we go. Slide that through. And you want to make sure that you go over top of the kickstand. If there's any contact there, just fold your kickstand down slightly. And we're going to move to the front. This one is loose, which means we're able to adjust. We can rotate these. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove the knob. Quite a few threads here to ensure that it stays locked down. So we'll just rotate these until it goes flying off. Okay, there we go. So we've got our knob removed. We have our brake cable here. We want to make sure that it's on the outside of this lever. And what I'm going to do is, right now it takes a little bit of effort to get this up into place. I can rotate this, and that's going to bring this eye down and make it easier to drop this piece down onto this. So now we've got that on there. We can go ahead and reinstall our knob and spin this down. Okay, and we're going to leave this loose for right now because we may need to make an adjustment later to ensure that everything is sitting in a straight position. So now we can go ahead and start on the rear here. We're going to start in the middle first. We have our rear rod. There's a hole in the rod here that's designed to line up with the hole in the front rod here. And our pin goes through both and holds them together. So that's what I'm going to start with. So I'm going to go ahead and run this into here, making sure that I line those two holes up. Looks like I'm pretty close there. And you want to make sure that you've got these very close so that they're easy to slide together. So now that that's set, we're going to move to the back. We have a knob, just like we have on the front. We're going to go ahead and remove that. And then we're going to install our rear onto this knob. Okay. So we want to make sure that that's above. Then we're going to line up our first threaded hole with the hole here and drop our knob down in until we catch threads, and then go ahead and fully install the knob. And at this point we want to go ahead and look at our alignment, because we also have this locking nut loose. So right now our arm here is still pointing at our non-drive wheel. And in the front here, our front wheel is pointing straight. So that means that these are properly set. If our wheel was pointing here and our lever was pointing at the wheel, we would need to add a little bit of adjustment to these levers. So we would unscrew these just a few turns and then lock our lock nuts down. But because these seem to be in a good spot, we're going to go ahead and hand tighten both of these nuts. And then we're going to go ahead and grab our adjustable wrench that comes with your trike and turn these down and lock them against here. So now I can't spin this nut by hand. So the front is fully locked, and we'll go ahead and do the exact same with the rear. So from here, set my adjustable wrench, turn this nut until it locks against our rear steering rod. Perfect. So now we have those both locked in place. Our rear steer is fully installed. Okay, so next we're going to start on our parking brake assembly. So it comes in two pieces here. We have the post and the actuating mechanism here. We have 2 bolts and 2 nuts that come pre-installed on the post, so we're going to start with that. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and remove the nut and bolt on both of these. Set them down so that we don't lose them. And then we're going to head and pre-install our post. So I've got this installed on the right side of the trike. This mechanism is set up so that it can be installed on either side of the trike. All of your controls are actually going to be on the left side, but the right side seems to be the main setup that we see for these models. So we have 1 bolt in place currently. You can see it through the first hole here. We're going to grab our nut and start that by hand. We're going to grab the second bolt and we're going to run it through the other hole on the other side of the frame here. And we're going to hand start that. And at this point we can't go any tighter by hand because we've hit the nylon that's built into the thread. So we're going to have to use our adjustable wrench here and our Allen wrench here. One note on alignment, you want to make sure that this is pointing straight up. You can see I can move this back and forth. So if you tighten one bolt all the way, so say we tighten this front one here, your parking post is going to be leaned forward, and if you tighten the other one, it's going to be leaned back. We want that to be pointing straight up in the air. So we want to tighten each one a little bit, move to the next one, back and forth until both are fully tight. You also want to look at where this sits on the frame. So you want to make sure that this is not too close to the wheel. If it drags that wheel, it's going to add resistance to the trike. It's going to make noise. It's going to take the paint off, so you want to make sure that you have a nice gap in between your wheel here, so you should be able to see some of the red frame in between the wheel and the parking post itself. So next I'm going to grab my tool. So we're going to use the 4mm on the multi-tool here, and we're going to use our adjustable wrench. So it's going to move around on you as you tighten these. I like to hold the bolt in place and use my adjustable wrench to run down the nut. Not sure if Adam can catch this. Rather than going from the sides, I'm actually going from the bottom here. I'm going to look and see. I've got about a thread sticking out here, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to this side, which you might be able to see better. Grab my adjustable wrench, lock this on here, just like that, and then I'm going to go ahead and spin my adjustable wrench. Now let's check. Let's see. Got about a thread hanging out on this side as well. About this time, we're going to want to start paying attention to our alignment. So we can still move back and forth here, but since each bolt is running about the same, I'm going to go ahead and move back to this back bolt. And I also want to make sure that I've still got that gap in between the post and the wheel. So now I'm going to run this in a few more turns. Okay. So you can see we can't move this post nearly as much. Got about 1/8 of an inch sticking out below that nut, so now I'm going to go ahead and move back to the rear bolt here, lock onto it, and continue tightening. Again, all while making sure that our post is not too close to our wheel. So you can see we've got almost no play here. Got an 1/8 of an inch and an 1/8 of an inch on either side. So I'm just going to do a little bit tighter on either one, and then this post will be fully installed. We can go ahead and start on the brake mechanism. Okay. 1, 2. And you can see we've eliminated all of our movement here. We only need to snug up one side because it's going to pull the other one together as well. So I'm going to finish on the one that I didn't just tighten, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up until that's fully grabbing against the frame. And you can see I've got just about the same amount of thread sticking out on my front bolt here and my rear bolt for you, which is actually inverse, but both of those are tightened the same. You can see my post is not loose, and I've got a nice gap here in between my wheel and my post. So next we're going to start on our actuating mechanism. So it's going to slide down on top of your post. You want to make sure the handle's pointing toward the rear and the lock itself is pointing toward the front. So, and you can see as I pull up, the mechanism moves down. So what I like to do is start with it all the way in the up position and then space it out about 1/4 to 1/2 an inch. So then I'm going to hold it in place there. I'm going to grab my multi-tool, and we're going to use the Phillips head screwdriver here. So there's a locking bolt here. I'm going to start driving this bolt in with the screwdriver, and that's going to start clamping our post. And we just wanted to get this mechanism close to start, and then as we tighten this bolt, it will fully clamp. I wouldn't recommend using any power tools for this. Do this by hand so that we don't over tighten. Now we're going to go ahead and run the nut in from the back side. And you can see we've started to clamp here, but we also are too low. So we're just now touching the wheel. So it's going to drag if we leave it here. So we're going to loosen our nut and then go ahead and slide this up. So again, I like to have 1/4 to 1/2 inch gap. Hold that in place with one hand while you tighten the locking bolt here. Okay. So now I'm clamped up against that. We'll try to run this down, and you can see we're a little bit too low still. So we're actually going to move this up just a little bit more. We might be erring on the side of that 1/2 inch rather than that 1/4, because we want this to grab the post well. Okay, so now we've got a good little gap. Again, around 1/2 an inch. And then we'll continue to tighten the locking assembly. Okay, so I can just get a finger under here. Let's go ahead and check that. So we'll pull that down, and you can see we're compressing against the tire here. Tire doesn't spin, locks everything in place. So I think we're in a really good position. So now I'm going to go ahead and push that lever back down. We know the height is good. We don't want anything to spin. So we're just going to continue to tighten this nut and bolt to ensure that nothing spins as you actuate the assembly. Okay. Good. So there, our parking brake's fully engaged and appears to be set properly. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and install our seat base. So we have all the components that we're going to need here. We have our actual seat base assembly. We have the plastic liner that sits in between the base and the frame. We have our seat post knob, and we have both seat base knobs. So I'm going to start with my plastic liner here. This is a good point to estimate where your rider needs to be. If your rider falls right into the middle of our leg length range, it's a good spot to start them here in the middle. If they're on the lower end of the adjustment range, good spot to start them is here in the front. And same with the high end. If they're on the higher end, we'll start them here in the back. Just so it's easier to see, we're going to start here in the middle front. Start with my liner. You can see it's got a taper to it, so we're going to need to open this taper and clip this down onto the frame. So I'm just going to push out on this side, down on this, and that's going to allow me to snap that right on there. Next, we're going to grab our seat base. Want to make sure that it's angled back, and we have a piece here that actuates. So we'll go ahead and line this up, make sure front and back's lined up with our white spacer. We're going to go ahead and grab our first seat base knob, and we're just going to go ahead and start threading these in. You want to make sure that these fully seat. So if you see here, I've got a gap in between the knob and the base. I want to make sure that that gap is completely gone. You can see it getting smaller and smaller. And then once I have it all the way against it, that is when we're going to start squeezing the frame. That's going to ensure our seat base is fully installed. So now we're going to go ahead and do our front one. Screw this in. Again, closing that gap. And if one is a little harder than the other, you can loosen one, and that will give you a little bit of room to continue tightening both. So again, here I've got the front fully tightened, the rear fully tightened. I don't have any gaps, and I have my seat base clamped against my frame to ensure my seat's going to be locked down. Last step here is to go ahead and install our seat post knob. So there's a nut here on the top of the seat base. We're just going to go ahead and thread this in. Doesn't need to thread all the way in, just go ahead and get it started. Then we'll move on to our seat and seat post. So one tip while you're installing your seat base here, if you're having trouble getting your knobs to go all the way through, there are holes in the black seat base. There's also holes in the white seat base, or the white liner. So you'll want to make sure you look through here, make sure those holes are lined up. If you're still having trouble, push down slightly on the seat base, and that's going to ensure that the base is fully against the liner, and then you should be able to get your knobs all the way through and threaded tight. So our next step is to install our seat post to our seat here. So we have our seat flipped over and we have it pointed away from us. We have our seat post here, and then we have our adjustable wrench. That's all we'll need for this step. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that our collar here on the seat is in a neutral position. So this will rotate forward and back. I want to make sure that this is somewhat flat, even with our seat here. That's just going to ensure you start in a neutral position, and you can adjust the dump angle from the seat from there. So now I'm going to take my seat post and I'm going to slide it into the mount here on the seat, and you can see it's going to want to walk forward. That's fine. And the goal here is to line up the front of the seat with the front of the seat post. We're going to take our adjustable wrench and we're going to start tightening the lock nuts. There are two. There's one on this side, and then there's one on the other side. I don't want to tighten one side more than the other. So I've got this one snug, and now I'm going to start on the other side, and I'm just going to start tightening these, quarter turn, half turn, whatever you can get at a time. And again, the goal is to have the same amount of threads sticking out on either side. So this side I've got about even with our threads here, and this side is still got about one or two threads recessed. So I'm going to move on to this side, and I'm going to finish my tightening here. So Use my adjustable wrench. Continue to tighten, all the while making sure that my seat post and seat are lined up. You can see not fully tight yet, so I can still rotate this to where they're not aligned. Make sure that as it gets tight, the two are lined up, pointing in the forward direction. So we're back on our bolt here. Quarter turn. Quarter turn. Quarter turn. We're almost level here, so we're going to tighten this just a little bit more. Okay, so I've got the same amount sticking out on either side, and I can no longer rotate my seat post in the seat. It doesn't pivot forward or back, so that means the two are locked together. Now we can go ahead and install this into our frame. So I'm going to flip the assembly over, come over to our trike, and you can see the angle of our seat base now matches the angle of our seat post. We're going to drop our seat post into the seat base, and you can see we've hit our adjustment knob here. There's a pin that's on a spring in this knob, so I'm going to pull the knob out, so actuate it, and then lower our seat post in from there. And you want to wait until you hear that click. That means you're in one of our secure positions. If you don't hear the click, so right now I can move it back and forth. There, I've locked in. Now I can go ahead and fully tighten the seat post knob. Tighten that, and what that's going to do is clamp against the seat post and keep our seat locked in place. Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and install our seat back. This unit doesn't have the laterals. We'll cover that later in the video. But the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and grab our L bracket for our seat back. And it's going to slide in directly behind your seat. There is a knob here that we need to loosen to ensure that we can slide this in. So we'll go ahead, slide this into position, and you want to push it in until it stops. It's a great starting point. You can do adjustments in and out later, but this is a great place to start. And then we're going to go ahead and retighten the locking knob here until it locks all the way down. Good. So we've got that locked. Now we can go ahead and start on our seat back. So this is our seat back here. Again, we have the same knob that's holding the seat post in. We want to unscrew this just a bit. Then we can go ahead and drop this down from the top. And then tighten. And again, you can adjust this up and down, but you want to make sure that the top of the seat back here isn't sticking out. So as long as this is not below the edge of the seat, it's in a good position. Next, we'll go ahead and grab our push handle. So it's going to slide straight down from the top here. So there are two holes, two tubes here, and then you can see I've hit locking knobs here. Go ahead and loosen those, and that drops for us. So next we're going to come up. I like to start with this flat, with the bottom of this tube. Tighten one side, tighten the other. If you're not using the laterals, you want to try to get these quick releases locked out of the way so nothing gets caught on them. Close that one and close that one. And that's our seat back installed. And next we'll go ahead and move on to our basket. So now we're going to go ahead and install our basket on the rear of our frame here. So both of the mounting bolts for the basket are pre-installed in the frame. So we're going to use our multi-tool, the 4mm Allen, and we're going to remove the bolts from the frame here. One. And remove the second. Okay, both of those. Now we can grab our basket. We're going to drop it over top of the frame. Make sure that the cable for your rear brake here is in the middle. And we should slide down right over our axle. And then you can see we're going to line up with our bolt hole here and here. So I'm going to start these by hand. We don't want to cross thread these bolts. So start them by hand to make sure that they go in straight. Okay, and I've got the first one started. And before I tighten it all the way, I'm going to start my second one. So I'm going to drop it in and start both of these by hand. And then I can take my wrench again, 4mm Allen, drop it down right here, and tighten one, and tighten the second. And we're just holding on the basket here. So we want to get them tight, but not too tight to where we're going to break the plastic. So once that's in, the basket is locked in place. And you can see from earlier where we clocked our quick release for our rear steer, we now have clearance on this side and on this side where our quick release is not contacting the basket. And our last step is going to be to install our safety flag. Comes in two pieces. Our lower section has the connector attached to it. It's going to slide down into our parking post here. There's a hole in the top of the parking post. And we're going to push the lower piece until it bottoms out there. To unravel our flag. And then slide it into the top here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and install our steering pin here. If it's not needed, you can set it in the basket along with your tools. If it is needed, the lower hole here on the head tube limits your steering to roughly 30 degrees. So I'm going to push it through until it comes out the other side, and that limits our steering. And then the hole just above here, that locks it in a straight position. So we're not going to need this today, so we're going to go ahead and set this in our basket so that we don't lose it. And then we've got two components left. We have a front reflector and a rear reflector. We're going to start with the front. It's going to come partially assembled. We're going to use our multi-tool. We have a Phillips screwdriver on here. We're going to remove the screw. We're then going to clip the front reflector onto our stem here. And because the telescoping handlebar is here, you might have to kind of fish it through. We went in upside down on that one. There we go. Now we're through. And what I did is I actually installed that upside down the first time, so you can see the angle of this reflector is pointing straight forward, straight up and down. If you do install this upside down, it's going to point straight back. You want to make sure that you've got this in that flat position. I may or may not have room to get our screw started, but if I don't have room, we can go ahead and adjust the telescoping rods for the handlebar. So looks like I'll have just enough room to go ahead and get this started, and then I'm going to go ahead and run this screw all the way in. And don't worry about alignment for this one. You're not going to have this so tight that it can't be adjusted. Just a few more turns. All right, another quarter turn. And we are there. Okay, so we've got our front reflector installed on our stem here. Then we're going to go ahead and start on our rear. We're going to slide this forward. We should have a red reflector remaining and one bolt. I like to do this off of the trike. So what I'm doing is there's one dowel pin and one hole. I've started the screw in the hole, and what I'm trying to do is just go ahead and install this. It'll be much easier to thread this into the plastic right here, and then we've already formed our threads, so once we go underneath the trike, this bolt will go in much easier. So we're going to come in here, and there are two spots, top and bottom, one for the bolt and one for that dowel. Top bottom should not matter on this. I'm going to work with the dowel in the bottom, dowel in the top and the bolt in the bottom, so that I have a little bit more room to work. I'm going to use my multi-tool with the Phillips head and just go ahead and screw this in. And once it's bottomed out and that reflector is fully tight, our assembly will be complete. Okay, looks like we got it tight there. So we have our rear reflector on, our front reflector on, both of our wheels installed, our rear steering installed, seat back, handlebars, and front wheel. This is our basic installation, and then next we'll go ahead and cover some different accessories. Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and install the heel pulley for our expanding pedals. So in your parts kit you should have a string. For the 20 it should be about 5 feet 60 inches long, and for the 16 it's going to be 50 inches long. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our pedals here. And you can see currently hit the ground if the pulley is not installed. So I'm going to start on my side here. So I've got two barrels, one here in the middle and one on the back of the pedal here. I'm going to take the open side of the string as opposed to the clamped side of the string. So I'm going to take the open side and I'm going to run it through the front side of the pedal, through that front barrel, into the back barrel here, and slide it all the way through until my clamp butts up against this barrel here. Flip my pedal over. We're going to route around to the back here. This is our pulley installed on the frame. You have a guide plate here on the front, and then you have the actual pulley, the wheel that spins inside here. So you're going to take your string, route it around the back of the pulley itself, and pull it all the way through. And we're going to move on to our other pedal here. And we're going to go the opposite of how we started. We're going to go through the outer barrel first, and then through the inner barrel. Then we're going to pull this a little bit tighter so that both of our pedals are sitting in the upright position. And then we're going to go ahead and tie a taut line hitch. So I'm going to pull my excess cord through here, hold those side by side, and then I've got this excess cord here, and I've got a small gap in between the two pieces here. I'm going to run the extra piece through once and a second time. So I've got two loops, look like that. And then I'm going to come around here, around the top, and I'm going to tie a single knot. And that's going to allow me to adjust the tension on this cord. So you can see it's locked in place here, but I've still got a good bit of movement in my pedals and in the cord. So then I'm going to grab my knot and I'm going to pull on this extra cord here, and until that's tight, this is tight. Then you can trim this off in the end, but now you can see they're much more stable. And as you pedal around, this pulley is going to go back and forth, and it's going to keep your pedals in the upright position. So next we're going to go ahead and install our H harness onto our seat back here. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and remove our push handle just so we have a little better access and visibility. So there's two small knobs back here. I'm going to loosen each one. It's not going to take much, maybe a quarter turn, and I can go ahead and slide this out of the way. Next, I'm going to grab my multi-tool that came in your kit, and I'm going to be using the Phillips head screwdriver. And here on the table, I've got the parts that are going to come along with your H-harness. I've got 4 Phillips head screws, 4 washers, and then the harness itself. The harness is directional. As a general rule, we'll see it set up in this orientation here. This gives a little bit more clearance for the chest area. So once it's installed, it's going to sit like this. So each one of these clips has a grommet at the end. And what we're going to do is remove the bolts that are in the back of the seat back here with our Phillips head screwdriver, and then install the grommet with the new hardware provided in your kit. So I'm going to grab my first screw and washer and go ahead and remove my first screw here. And you can see the screws in your kit are longer to accommodate for that grommet. So I'm going to set the old one to the side. I'm going to pre-install my washer onto my screw. I'm going to grab one of my upper pieces here, and I want to make sure that it's oriented properly. So I've got the harness, again, pre-installed where it should be, pulled over the top, making sure that there's not any twists in the cable here. And then I'm going to go ahead and partially install the screw. And go ahead and get that started. And then I'm just going to run that screw in. Okay, good. Now we can start on the other one here. Same thing, just on the other side. Okay. Oh, washer stuck on the table. All right, so now we've installed our washer onto the screw. We've got the other top piece here. We're going to run it through our grommet, and then we're going to start it back into the hole. And you're just looking for snug here. Because you're screwing into plastic, you don't want to over tighten. You certainly don't want to use an impact or any power tools on these screws, because if you over tighten them, you can strip it out. So there are my 2 uppers. That's not going to change depending on your rider. What could change is going to be the lower mounts. So we have the same 2 screws here on the bottom of the seat back. We also have 2 screws holding on the bracket to the back itself. A smaller rider can likely accommodate here at the bottom. If you have a larger rider, you may need to use this lower bolt on the bracket here, and that's going to give you more room to be able to move the H-harness out. And Adam can probably see that here from the front. So here in this spot, you can see how much of a gap I've got if I come down to the bottom here. Now these aren't adjusted yet, but you can see I can't bring this out nearly as much as up here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the bracket bolt, just since it's different. If you were to do the 2 lower screws, it's the same as the uppers, same process for both. So we'll go ahead and just remove one of these bracket screws. Okay. Going to grab our hardware. We can still use what came in the kit. And then we're going to grab our lower strap here. We're going to run it around the side, put our screw through, and then back into the same mounting hole. Okay, now we've got one more. We're just going to repeat the same step here on the other side. So we're going to go ahead and remove this screw. It's not a bad idea to hold on to these screws in case you ever decide your rider doesn't need the H-harness anymore. You may want to reuse them when the H-harness is removed. Now we'll come around to our other side. Screw through with the washer and run our bolt back in. Okay, so we've got all 4 screws installed. And then one quick thing just to make adjustments on here, quite simple. You're just going to pull on the strap itself, and then you can adjust it all the way out until you hit the sewn in stop on the harness itself on each spot. And then once you've got your rider in, or should I say to get your rider in, you'll want to unclip one side. So you'll unclip the lower and the upper, and then they can slide into place. You can clip this around them. This is going to go over their shoulder, this around their waist, and then you're just going to pull these straps tight around them, and that should hold them nicely in place. So that's how you install our H-harness. Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and reinstall or install our knee separator. So you've got 2 screws that are pre-installed from the factory here, just underneath your seat post. They are 5mm Allen bolts, so we're going to be using our multi-tool, the number 5 that's in this kit. So along with your knee separator, you should get 2 pieces. You're going to get the pad itself with the extension tube and the mounting tube. So we're going to set the pad to the side for now, and we're going to go ahead and install our bracket by removing these 2 bolts. Mount this bracket into place, reinstall the bolts, and then we can slide our pad on. So these are pre-installed from the factory, then we can just remove these. Front one is off. And for the rear one, it's a bit of a tight angle, so you might want to turn your wrench up quite a bit to give you a better angle to work on these. So we've got that removed. Now we can go ahead and put our bracket in place. Pull our bolt through. Sorry, I should show that. So you've got 2 holes and you have a little bit of adjustment on the front and rear. So I'm going to start with the front just to hold this in place because it's a little bit easier to get to. Start this by hand. That looks good. Move on to our rear. And then we will start that by hand. Okay, and then we're just going to tighten both of those up. Okay. And there is going to be just a little bit of wiggle room on your bracket here. So you want to make sure that it's in a straight position. As you can see, I can still move this around just a little bit because I don't have it fully tight yet. So you want to make sure that's pointing straight with the seat. And then once you get it tight, it will be fixed to the seat post. So now that I've got both those bolts tight, I can start on my pad here. So just like most of the other components on the trike, we have a quick release lever that we can go ahead and open. And then we're going to slide this onto here until we contact the front of the seat. Depending on your rider, you can orient this in 2 different directions. You can go down or you can go up. That is typically what we would see as the up position. And then we're going to tighten the quick release and make sure to keep the knee separator in the up position. And just like all the other quick releases, we're looking for that 20 to 30 pounds of pressure to close. That will hold it straight. So we'll hold that, and then we'll go ahead and close this. And then that's our knee separator installed. Okay, so next we're going to start on our positioning belt. It doesn't come pre-installed from the factory, but there are 2 welded pieces here on your seat back that have slots in them for us to mount our positioning strap. So here on the table, I've got the strap that came in the box. I have removed 1 clip and then the holder, just so that we can go ahead and slide this through. So those will be pre-installed, just slide those off. And now we can go ahead and move on to the trike. So we're going to take the non-clip side and we're going to go ahead and run it over the top and into the bottom of one side. And then we're going to route it through. And then we're going to go from the bottom to the top of the other side. And then you can go ahead and slide that through. So I think you can probably see that on camera, that now we've got that fully clipped around the post here. So that's sort of the configuration that you would be looking for. And you're going to need to make some adjustment on this, but I'm just going to try to guess. So we've pulled through, we kind of want that belt in the center for our rider. So just guessing the size of the rider, I'm going to have that sit in the middle of the seat. Then I'm going to go ahead and grab our clip here. So from the top, I'm going to go underneath the first side, over the middle, and then back under here. And then I can go ahead and slide this out of our way. So now that we have the strap holder installed, we're going to go ahead and install our clip. So we want to make sure we have this oriented correctly. So I've got the ridges here on top, and that's going to grab the strap once I insert it. So I'm going to go into the inner slot here, where my finger is from the bottom. Go in and through, and then we're going to go down and through on that front slot there. And then that's going to put us in a good position to be able to clip these together. Then I'm going to pull this tight, and then what I want to do with the strap holder here is any excess that I've got, I want to go ahead and go through the first hole, over the top, and into the second hole. And that's going to hold everything together, ensure that it doesn't slip. So there we go. Now we have our positioning strap installed, and we can move on to the next step. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and install our lateral supports. In the box with your trike, you should have gotten 2 T-bars and 2 lateral pads. And that's all we're going to need for the lateral support system. So we're going to start here with our T-bars. You also have 2 holes and 2 quick releases that are pre-installed on the seat back here. So our T-bars are going to slide into those holes, and depending on where you have the back placed and the height of your rider, you may need to come from the top, which is going to move the laterals a little bit higher, or the bottom, which is going to move them a little bit lower. But just for ease of visibility, we're going to go from the top here. So we're just going to drop this T-bar in here. You want to make sure that the quick release is on the back side of this top T. The front should be open. So we're just going to drop it down in place here. And we don't need to really tighten anything yet, because we don't know where our rider is going to need it. We're going to move on to our second T-bar, and we're going to slide it in on this side here. And again, don't need to tighten anything, just making sure that our quick releases are still functioning as they should. And then we have our laterals. These are not side specific, so you can go from either, it won't matter. So what we can do is go ahead and slide into the first one here, and then we need to lock it in place. Unlike our previous version, these laterals are not keyed, so they can rotate instead of just staying in the upright position, with the feeling that that's going to give our riders a more comfortable position, so that as they lean into the laterals also spin with them. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this first. Again, more quick releases, just like our Others on the trike, we're looking for 20 to 30 pounds of pressure to close these. So once I've got this locked in, this top quick release, I can't spin this anymore. May be able to spin it just a little bit with full force, and then depending on what height we need and what angle we need. So if we had a larger rider and we needed to rotate out, we could do that, or we could rotate in for a smaller rider, and then we can make that up and down adjustment as well. So again, we're just going to stop here in the middle and then tighten this quick release up using the nut on the back side, and then clamp this tube in place. And now we can no longer move the lateral up, we can no longer move it out, so this one's fixed. Then we'll go ahead and move on to the other side. It's the same assembly. We'll go ahead and slide our lateral in. You want to pay attention to the other lateral on the depth, how far you've pushed it in. So you can see we've got maybe about 1/2 inch sticking out the back here. I'm going to target about the same here. And again, these will spin, so I'm just going to make sure that I keep those in a straight position. Tighten the nut on the back side here, and then tighten our quick release. Okay, so we got that one tight. So now it's locked into place. Again, we're going to pick our height, pick our swivel, and we're going to try to lock these together here. And we have one last quick release to install. We're going to go ahead and close that one. Now we have our laterals set, and we have our belt here in the front, which can be adjusted just like your positioning strap can. You're just going to pull this strap through, and then you should be able to bring it pretty close to all the way in with this strap. So that's how we install our laterals. But if you have any questions or issues while assembling your Paceline, please reach out to our tech support or customer service groups, and we will be sure to get you taken care of.